Welcome to our journey into the world of microeconomics. In this video, we'll break down the essential concepts that form the foundation of this fascinating field. Microeconomics is all about understanding how individuals and businesses make decisions, how they interact in markets, and how these choices shape the world around us. Whether you're a student, professional, or just curious about how the economy works on a small scale, this guide will help you grasp the basics. Let's start by exploring what microeconomics actually means and why it matters in our daily lives. Microeconomics focuses on the behavior of individual consumers, firms, and industries. Unlike macroeconomics, which looks at the economy as a whole, microeconomics zooms in on the smaller units that make up the economic system. It examines how people make choices about what to buy, how much to work, and how businesses decide what to produce. By studying these decisions, microeconomics helps us understand the forces that drive prices, wages, and the allocation of resources. This knowledge is crucial for making informed decisions, both as consumers and as business owners. One of the most fundamental ideas in microeconomics is scarcity. Resources like time, money, and materials are limited, but our wants and needs are virtually endless. Because of this, we all have to make choices about how to use what we have. Every decision involves a trade-off. Choosing one thing means giving up something else. Understanding scarcity and the necessity of making choices is the starting point for all economic thinking. It's what drives individuals, businesses, and even governments to prioritize and strategize. Whenever we make a choice, we face opportunity cost, the value of the next best alternative that we give up. For example, if you spend your evening studying instead of going out with friends, the opportunity cost is the fun you miss. Businesses also face opportunity costs when they decide how to use their resources. Recognizing opportunity costs helps us make better decisions by considering what we're sacrificing. This concept is central to microeconomic analysis and applies to every decision, big or small. Supply and demand are the cornerstones of microeconomic theory. Demand refers to how much of a product consumers want to buy at different prices, while supply is how much producers are willing to sell. The interaction between supply and demand determines the price and quantity of goods in a market. When demand increases or supply decreases, prices tend to rise. Conversely, if supply increases or demand falls, prices usually drop. Understanding this dynamic helps explain why prices change and how markets reach equilibrium. Law of demand states that, all else being equal, as the price of a good increases, the quantity demanded decreases. In other words, people buy less of something when it becomes more expensive. This relationship is usually shown as a downward-sloping demand curve on a graph. The law of demand helps explain consumer behavior and is a key tool for predicting how changes in price will affect sales. It's a simple idea, but it has powerful implications for businesses and policymakers alike. The other side, the law of supply, tells us that as the price of a good rises, producers are willing to supply more of it. This is because higher prices can make production more profitable. The law of supply is typically illustrated with an upward-sloping supply curve. Together with the law of demand, it helps us understand how markets function and how prices are set. When both laws interact, they determine the market equilibrium where supply meets demand. Market equilibrium is the point where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. At this price, there's no shortage or surplus. Everything produced is sold. If the price is above equilibrium, there will be excess supply, leading sellers to lower prices. If it's below equilibrium, there will be excess demand, causing prices to rise. This balancing act is what keeps markets functioning smoothly. Understanding equilibrium helps us predict how markets respond to changes in supply or demand. Elasticity measures how much the quantity demanded or supplied responds to changes in price. If a small price change leads to a big change in demand, the product is considered elastic. If demand hardly changes, it's inelastic. Elasticity helps businesses and policymakers understand how sensitive consumers and producers are to price changes. This concept is crucial for setting prices, planning production, and predicting the effects of taxes or subsidies. There are several types of elasticity in microeconomics. Price elasticity of demand measures how much demand changes with price. Income elasticity looks at how demand shifts as consumer income changes. Cross-price elasticity examines how the demand for one product responds to price changes in another. Each type provides valuable insights into consumer behavior and market dynamics. Understanding these distinctions helps businesses tailor their strategies and anticipate market trends. Consumer surplus is the difference between what consumers are willing to pay for a good and what they actually pay. It represents the extra benefit or value consumers receive from a purchase. For example, if you're willing to pay $10 for a movie ticket but only pay $7, your consumer surplus is $3. This concept helps economists measure the welfare and satisfaction of consumers in a market. It's a key indicator of market efficiency and consumer benefit. Producer surplus is the difference between the price producers receive for a good and the minimum amount they're willing to accept. It reflects the extra profit or benefit producers gain from selling at a market price higher than their minimum acceptable price. Producer surplus, along with consumer surplus, helps measure the total welfare created by a market. This concept is important for understanding how markets benefit both buyers and sellers. Marginal utility refers to the additional satisfaction or benefit a consumer gets from consuming one more unit of a good or service. As you consume more of something, the extra benefit you receive usually decreases, a concept known as diminishing marginal utility. For example, the first slice of pizza might be incredibly satisfying, but the fourth or fifth slice is less enjoyable. Understanding marginal utility helps explain consumer choices and how demand curves are shaped. Every consumer faces budget constraints, which limit the amount of goods and services they can buy. A budget constraint represents all the combinations of goods a consumer can afford, given their income and the prices of those goods. Making choices within these limits is a key part of microeconomic analysis. It helps explain why people prioritize certain purchases and how changes in income or prices affect their buying decision. Difference curves are used to show different combinations of goods that provide the same level of satisfaction to a consumer. Each point on an indifference curve represents a bundle of goods between which the consumer is indifferent. These curves help economists analyze consumer preferences and the trade-offs people are willing to make. By combining indifference curves with budget constraints, we can predict consumer choices and how they respond to changes in prices or income. Utility maximization is the idea that consumers try to get the most satisfaction possible from their limited resources. By choosing the combination of goods that lies on the highest possible indifference curve within their budget, consumers maximize their utility. This principle underlies much of consumer theory in microeconomics. It helps explain why people make the choices they do and how they respond to changes in prices or income. Businesses must decide how to produce goods and services efficiently. Production involves combining inputs like labor, capital, and raw materials to create outputs. The costs of production include both fixed costs, which don't change with output, and variable costs, which do. Understanding production and costs helps firms make decisions about pricing, output, and investment. It's also essential for analyzing how businesses compete in the marketplace. Microeconomics, the short run is a period during which at least one input is fixed, while the long run is when all inputs can be varied. This distinction is important for understanding how businesses adjust to changes in demand or technology. In the short run, firms may not be able to change their factory size, but in the long run they can expand or contract as needed. These concepts help explain how businesses plan for the future and respond to market conditions. Economies of scale occur when increasing production lowers the average cost per unit. As firms grow larger, they can often produce goods more efficiently, benefiting from bulk purchasing, specialized labor, and better technology. This gives larger firms a competitive advantage and can lead to lower prices for consumers. However, there are limits. Eventually, firms may face diseconomies of scale where costs start to rise again. Perfect competition is a market structure where many firms sell identical products and no single firm can influence the price. In this environment, prices are determined by supply and demand, and firms can enter or exit the market freely. Perfect competition is an idealized model, but it helps economists understand how markets work when there are no barriers to entry or exit. Real-world markets often differ, but this concept provides a useful benchmark. Monopoly exists when a single firm controls the entire market for a product or service. This firm can set prices without competition, often leading to higher prices and less choice for consumers. Monopolies can arise from barriers to entry, such as patents, resource ownership, or government regulation. While some monopolies are natural or even beneficial, most economists agree that competition is generally better for consumers. Oligopoly is a market structure where a few large firms dominate the market. These firms may compete or cooperate, and their decisions can have a big impact on prices and output. Oligopolies are common in industries like airlines, automobiles, and telecommunications. Understanding how firms behave in oligopolies helps explain why prices may be stable or why companies sometimes act together to limit competition. Monopolistic competition is a market structure where many firms sell similar but not identical products. Each firm has some control over its prices because of product differentiation. Think of brands in clothing, restaurants, or electronics. This structure combines elements of both competition and monopoly, leading to a wide variety of choices for consumers. It's a common market structure in the real world. Sometimes markets don't work perfectly. Market failures occur when the free market doesn't allocate resources efficiently. Common causes include externalities, public goods, and information asymmetry. When market failures happen, government intervention may be needed to correct the problem. Understanding market failures helps explain why policies like taxes, subsidies, or regulations are sometimes necessary. Externalities are costs or benefits that affect people who are not directly involved in a transaction. For example, pollution from a factory can harm nearby residents, while a well-kept garden can benefit neighbors. Externalities can be positive or negative, and they often lead to market failures. Addressing externalities is a key reason for government intervention in the economy. Public goods are goods that are non-excludable and non-rivalrous, meaning that one person's use doesn't reduce availability for others, and no one can be easily excluded from using them. Examples include national defense, street lighting, and clean air. Because private markets often underprovide public goods, governments usually step in to ensure they are available to everyone. Information asymmetry occurs when one party in a transaction has more or better information than the other. This can lead to problems like adverse selection and moral hazard. For example, a used car seller may know about hidden defects that the buyer can't see. Information asymmetry can prevent markets from working efficiently and is another reason for regulation and consumer protection laws. Governments intervene in markets to correct failures, promote fairness, and achieve social goals. This can include setting price controls, providing subsidies, or regulating industries. While intervention can help solve problems, it can also create new challenges such as inefficiency or unintended consequences. Understanding when and how government should intervene is a key topic in microeconomics. Taxes are used to raise revenue and influence behavior, while subsidies encourage certain activities by lowering costs. Both tools can help correct market failures, such as reducing pollution or supporting essential industries. However, taxes and subsidies can also distort markets if not used carefully. Microeconomics analyzes the effects of these policies on prices, production, and welfare. Price controls are government-imposed limits on how high or low a price can go. Price ceilings, like rent controls, keep prices from rising above a certain level, while price floors, like minimum wage laws, set a minimum price. While price controls can help protect consumers or workers, they can also lead to shortages or surpluses if not set carefully. Microeconomics studies the effects of these policies on markets. Labor markets are where workers offer their skills and employers seek to hire them. Wages are determined by the supply and demand for labor. as well as factors like education, experience, and working conditions. Microeconomics examines how labor markets function, what influences wage levels, and how policies like minimum wage laws affect employment. Understanding labor markets is essential for analyzing income distribution and employment trends. Capital markets are where savings and investments are channeled between those who have money and those who need it. These markets include stocks, bonds, and other financial instruments. Microeconomics studies how capital markets allocate resources, set interest rates, and influence business investment. Understanding capital markets is important for analyzing economic growth and financial stability. Entrepreneurs play a vital role in microeconomics by creating new products, services, and businesses. They take risks, innovate, and drive economic growth. Microeconomics examines how entrepreneurs respond to incentives, overcome obstacles, and contribute to market efficiency. Understanding entrepreneurship helps explain how economies evolve and adapt to changing conditions. Game theory is the study of strategic decision-making, where the outcome depends on the actions of others. In microeconomics, game theory helps explain how firms compete, cooperate, or negotiate in various market structures. Concepts like Nash equilibrium and dominant strategies are used to predict behavior in situations where individuals or firms must anticipate the actions of others. Nash equilibrium occurs when all participants in a game choose the best strategy they can, given the strategies chosen by others. No one has an incentive to change their decision unilaterally. This concept is widely used in microeconomics to analyze competition, pricing, and negotiation. Understanding Nash equilibrium helps predict outcomes in markets where firms or individuals interact strategically. Behavioral economics combines insights from psychology and economics to explain why people sometimes make irrational decisions. It challenges the traditional assumption that individuals always act in their own best interest. Concepts like bounded rationality, loss aversion, and framing effects help explain real-world behavior that doesn't fit standard economic models. Behavioral economics is a growing field that adds depth to our understanding of decision-making. Bounded rationality is the idea that people make decisions with limited information, time, and cognitive resources. Instead of always choosing the optimal solution, individuals often settle for a satisfactory one. This concept helps explain why people sometimes make mistakes or rely on rules of thumb. Recognizing bounded rationality is important for designing policies and products that align with real human behavior. Loss aversion is a behavioral economics concept that describes how people tend to prefer avoiding losses over acquiring equivalent gains. In other words, the pain of losing $10 is stronger than the pleasure of gaining $10. This tendency can influence consumer choices, investment decisions, and even public policy. Understanding loss aversion helps explain why people sometimes act cautiously or resist change. Framing effects occur when the way information is presented influences decisions. For example, people may react differently to a product labeled 90% fat-free versus 10% fat. Even though the information is the same, the framing changes perceptions. Framing effects are a key topic in behavioral economics and help explain why marketing and communication matter so much in economic decisions. Asymmetric information is a situation where one party in a transaction has more or better information than the other. This can lead to problems like adverse selection, where bad products drive out good ones, or moral hazard, where people take risks because they don't bear the full consequences. Addressing asymmetric information is important for creating fair and efficient markets. Adverse selection occurs when buyers or sellers have information that the other party doesn't, leading to poor market outcomes. For example, in health insurance, people who know they are likely to need medical care are more likely to buy insurance, raising costs for everyone. Adverse selection is a classic example of how information problems can distort markets and why regulation may be needed. Moral hazard arises when people take more risks because they don't bear the full consequences of their actions. For example, someone with insurance may be less careful about avoiding accidents. Moral hazard is another form of market failure caused by asymmetric information. Understanding this concept helps explain why contracts and regulations are designed to align incentives. Principal-agent problem occurs when one person, the agent, is supposed to act on behalf of another, the principal, but their interests aren't perfectly aligned. For example, a manager-agent may not always act in the best interest of the company's owners' principals. This problem can lead to inefficiency and requires mechanisms like incentives or monitoring to solve. Market efficiency refers to how well markets allocate resources to their most valued uses. In an efficient market, goods and services go to those who value them most, and resources are used in the best possible way. Microeconomics studies the conditions that lead to efficiency and the factors that can cause inefficiency, such as market power or externalities. Understanding market efficiency is key to evaluating economic policies and outcomes. We've covered the basic concepts of microeconomics, from scarcity and opportunity cost to market structures, failures, and behavioral insights. These ideas form the building blocks for understanding how individuals and businesses make decisions, how markets work, and how policies shape economic outcomes. By mastering these fundamentals, you'll be better equipped to analyze real-world issues and make informed choices in your personal and professional life. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of microeconomics.